Hello, my art friends. I hope you're enjoying this studying the Still Life Masters series. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. So let me know what you're thinking, what your thoughts are as I'm going through and kind of breaking down these paintings technically. This is specifically for artists, so I'm not going to be sharing like a lot of necessarily art history information or personal information about the artist. But this is really to help other artists out there, still life artists like myself, learn from these paintings and then take that information and integrate it into your own work. This has been, cheers, by the way, it's 5 o'clock. Here's to creating beautiful art. Um, So this is one of the primary ways that I know I developed, and I'm super excited for today because, and it was really hard to pick one from this artist because there's so many from all these artists that I just love. So I guess these first ones I'm trying to kind of pick maybe some that might be more well known, but Jean-Baptiste Simeon Chardin is who we're going to be looking at today. And actually, he was one of the very first artists that I ever did a master copy of. Not of this painting, however, the one that I did had like it was like had like a chicken or something hanging down. But let's see, when was this painted? 1700s? Yeah, 1760. So this is, pre the last, couple of artists that we were looking at. So let's get the biggest image we can here to check this out. He's kind of like, I think, the father of, kind of kitchen themed still lifes, shelf edge still life where things are more on eye level, more shelf edge, less perspective. He does have some that are, looking down, still lifes. And of course, he has there's a floral of his that everybody, um, I think almost everybody knows and loves. So maybe at some point we will look at that one. Okay. So I just love this one. Yeah, I just love it. Even, it's so old, and I love that he dated it, by the way. How cool is that? Oh, I thought we could zoom in on this. It's happening. So look, I'll see if I can find a different image. I thought this one would let us zoom in. Um, so this one, it's like all of these wonderful elements, going from left to right. What I love about this one too is the variety of the heights. I think the title of this one is Still Life with Jar of Olives. And he has that jar of olives placed on that second right hand third of the canvas. I remember whenever I was studying, still life composition and trying to understand how to set up a successful still life composition, one of the first things I started doing was kind of gridding out these artist canvases into the thirds and just kind of noticing how large was their largest object, for example. This is a painting that it is kind of a big painting and it feels like a big painting, which is different from last week's Antoine Vallon painting, which was a big painting, but in digital image, it feels like a smaller painting. The reason why this one feels much larger in contrast to the Vallon is that there's much more empty space, right? So for some reason, when there's more empty space, it makes us feel like it's, well, more space, right? Like bigger, more space. And so he has that main object here on the right-hand side third of the composition, which is kind of like the prime real estate of the canvas. And I would say this is probably about half the height. I haven't measured it exactly. This one might be a little bit over half the height of the canvas, meaning the height of the olive jar. But I find that that's kind of a good rule of thumb if you're wanting to get the sense of like a big kind of more expansive feeling painting, that your dominant object be anywhere from a third of the height to half the height of the canvas, trying not to go over half the height of the canvas. And if you remember in last week's Ballon painting of the butter pretty much took up the entire canvas. There was very little space, especially above the butter. There's a little more space below the butter. Okay. One thing also I've discovered in still life painting is having a variety of value. So again, going back to those value and color contrast. So value contrast and color contrast. Going back to those elements of art making, value really does all of the work, and then color tends to get most of the attention. You may have heard that statement before, and I think it is really true. So we have a very simple, complementary color arrangement here with the red contrasting against the greens. Pretty sure that probably a lot of these yellows, have most likely faded or, over time, maybe lost some of their luster over the years. I mean, we're talking what? How many years is this? 400 years? 400 years? 300 years? So I don't know. Can't do math right now. And then value contrast. There's not a huge amount of value contrast in this painting, but there's enough to make it really compelling and interesting. So the dark of the wine, the dark of the olive jar contrasting against, the brilliant white of the porcelain at the end of the painting. Also just love the variety of shapes and sizes that he's using in this painting, without it feeling too broken up. Like, I mean, he has pastries in here. I think this might be a wooden bowl turned upside down, but maybe not. Maybe that's a loaf of bread. I'm not sure. He has multiple different kinds of fruit, cookies or something over here. A half drunk glass of wine. Somebody like me must have been in the room whenever this painting was being made, or maybe Chardin and I have more in common than I know. This almost looks like a little pumpkin, but I don't know for certain if it is or not. And then the olive jars. So it's kind of interesting just how many different objects and elements he put in here. And it all works really, really beautifully. He has almost like no paint in the background. It almost just looks like a tone or a stain. Let me see if we can, I really like it better when we can really zoom in. Let me try this. Here we go. There we go. Oh, I guess that's just as big as this one will go. That's the largest image available, I think, on the interwebs. On the interwebs. Bummer. Okay. I really wanted to be able to zoom in on that, but I don't think we can, unfortunately. So this is another one where, obviously using lead white to get this beautiful shimmer in the highlights on the apple. I love how he places this one little green and red apple right at the front, sort of like not quite to the star of the show yet, but almost to the star of the show. So he's kind of building things up, starting off with like less color. These objects are more kind of similar to the color of the background, just kind of warm neutrals with the knife, starting us off, the little pumpkin or gourd, the wine, very desaturated, almost just looks like a burnt umber. And so very similar to the color that he's using in the background. So he has very limited saturated color in this painting. It's quite astonishing, actually, how little of color he's using. Makes me a little anxious. I kind of long for more color because I love color. But what little color he does have in here really does pack a punch and makes a statement. And part of the reason why it does that is because he has so much neutral in this painting. So, and then he's using the complementary colors to play off of one another with the red and the green. And, another thing I really admire about this painting as I'm looking at it is pears are freaking hard to paint. Have you guys ever noticed that? Like, I don't know. I think pears have to be one of the most challenging fruits to paint, where it doesn't just end up looking like a light bulb or, like too symbolic or too plain. This one, I think the amount of observation and focus and effort that has to go into getting this pear to look like that, to have that kind of specific characteristic, like it feels like that was a very specifically observed pear, while still being universal. Because I know sometimes we might get fruit to paint or vegetables to paint, and there might be something odd about it or something weird about it, or maybe it's kind of going bad, or anyways have some surface flaws or whatnot in it that aren't really appealing, and sometimes the temptation is to just go ahead and paint it like we see it. So I always feel like there is this fine line in still life between I want to capture the essence and the characteristic of that particular object that I'm looking at, while also not falling prey to just copying what I'm seeing. Like, I want to make sure that it looks like a beautiful flower or a beautiful fruit in my still life painting. This is also a great painting if you're trying to understand how to paint glass. His light, I often have my light coming from the opposite direction of his in this painting. My light is often coming from the left-hand side. His light in this case is coming from the right-hand side. But you can learn how to paint glass and translucent things by studying this painting. So the starting edge of the glass over here definitely goes a lot darker, which is what happens. Same thing here on this glass. So you want to make sure whenever you're painting glass that you do that. And then, the highlight in the center, usually you always want your highlights somewhat close to center so that you can create more of a sense of form in your objects, because you've already got the contours already built in. And so to create that sense of like three-dimensionality and roundness, you want to start to build attention to detail in the or more focal detail in the front and center of the object. So for glass, you want that darker starting edge, and then you want light passing through the glass to some degree on the opposite edge. And then, mostly, unless it's a colored glass like this green glass is, if it's clear, it's mostly going to be, having some of the background, whatever's behind it, showing through it with that really strong, highlight to make it look glass-like. Anyways, Chardin is just one of my favorite still life artists. And I guess I just kind of consider him to be like the father of still life painting. And he actually, I believe at some point was the head of the French Academy even, which is amazing to me because still life painting is still to this day is often kind of put down as like a lower or lesser art form, which I'm like, do you know how hard it is to paint a good still life and to be able to compose a good still life and set up a good still life? It's very challenging. So anyway, so I just find that to be really inspiring about him. I hope that you've enjoyed this. If you do not know much of his work, now he also did figures and different genres, lots of self-portraits. A lot of people know him for his self-portraits, where he wraps the stuff on his head and head scarves and all that. But definitely go check out some of his still lifes. There's so much value to be gleaned from them. I really encourage you, invite you to consider not discounting some of these old paintings because they really understood so much about painting. And I would consider not discounting them just because they're brown or they don't look like our paintings today, or you know, they look different than maybe what you're used to seeing in the art magazines or on Instagram. So there's just so much that we can learn from these masters, so much that we can actually take away without, you know, necessarily painting just like them. Okay, so I hope that this has been inspiring to you, encouraging, helpful, all the things. And let me know your feedback in the comments below. Also, if you have a painting that an old master painting you'd like me to look at and kind of break down for you, I'd love to consider that. So you can let me know in the comments below. Okay, happy painting, everybody. Bye for now.